Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, there is this series on Netflix, and it's called The Platform. There's Platform 1 and 2. And something unique that I wanted to kind of discuss, really analyze, because I like doing that, is the creativity, the uniqueness, and some lessons we can extract from this series. It's a bit, it has gore, fear, it's thrilling, okay? And if you are a horror movie enthusiast, like myself, you're often quite tired of the cliche, evil nun, demonic cathedral, haunted house, haunted hospital, a scary guy in the woods, werewolves and vampires and all this garbage. It's just repeated ad nauseum, right? But this series was actually something new on the market, and it stuck out with me for quite some time after I watched it. And so I wanted to dissect it and, dig into the meat of it and just point out how I think it's a sort of cinematic genius work. Now, it opens with a chef inspecting food items, okay? Now, this kind of touched home because I worked in the restaurant industry. I am a self-made chef, and when it comes to the higher up fields, there's more and more scrutiny upon quality of food, hygiene, and cross-contamination, food handling, all that. So, I'm sure you've come across videos where someone's made some street food and it's just so unsanitary, you wonder how those people haven't all died of diarrhea, and then you contrast that with fine dining. Okay? And you begin to notice that there's this middle ground of not too overly luxurious food that's overpriced with small portions, and then slop that should feed pigs, Yet you want to remain grateful for whatever you have. So the whole conversation around food, quality, taste buds, greed, gluttony, starvation comes really strongly in this series. And a good chef, a good manager, is going to really watch the line and watch what's being handed to customers. Now, it is amazing the dynamic of the chefs living that luxurious position, and then contrasting it to the geometric, stone cold cells of the pit, the platform pit. It's just a very well done contrast. There's even an angle of some stairs that are very ornate. And then when you look at the verticalness of the pit itself, it's well done. I like how it contrasts those two worlds of freedom, color, and joy, and choice versus grayness, darkness, no other choice. Okay? Now, the eye zoom-ins are quite cliche. I wish some movies and shows would stop with it. Oh, they zoom in on someone's eye and the pupil is like this, and you're like, and I'm so over that. Just like how in Squid Game, the guy who recruits people, he was doing Russian roulette. The Walking Dead uses Russian roulette. I'm very over Russian roulette in movies. It's not scary anymore, and it's overused. So the eye zoom in is a bit cliche, and I am tired of it. Now, the cell levels, I have notes here that I'm going to refer to. You can see one another up and down. And in the center is that square. You can call it maybe a square, rectangle. I'd say it's a square is perfectly, but it does seem a bit elongated, so it could be a rectangle, but square, rectangle, however you prefer. But what's unique is that there isn't a railing, so if you slip, you get pushed, you know, you roll around when you sleep and fall off your bed, you're donezo, and that has a lot to do with this sort of internal mechanism where we humans like, in philosophy there's the sublime. And sublime gets used in different ways, but there's a sublime where you're in awe of something larger than you, but you're in a position of safety, so you don't have fear and you're allowed to participate in the awe feeling. So if you saw Niagara Falls from a safe position, but you were close, you'd be in awe. Versus you're on top of a very tall building, your shoes are right at the edge, you get to see the horizon, but, you know, one person spooks you, there you go, you're off the edge. You know, you're up close to a lion or an elephant in the wild, but there's that element of fear because there isn't a protective barrier. Whereas when you're in the zoo, looking at a polar bear, there's that thick glass there that allows you to appreciate the animal, but also take comfort in being safe. Okay? Now, the levels of this pit, this prison, if you will, which is what it is, there isn't any railings upon the depth below and up. And for a while, they don't know how many levels there are. So there's level 0, where this platform is filled with everybody's favorite foods. They're asked upon their intake, what's your favorite food? Gets put on there. The fine chefs make it, and it's a beautiful tablescape. And then it's lowered from level 0, and by the time it gets to level 333, there's nothing left but broken glass. Okay? So, you would think, oh, well, we'll just jump on the platform and shoot up. But no, you can't do that because it zooms up past, and if you're in the way, it will obviously take some part off of your body. And it doesn't get, like, you know when you put your hand to elevator doors, it stops? That doesn't do that. And then platform number 2, the comrades, they're called, the guardians, they put a woman's arm down on the platform because she was like not following the rules, and then the platform comes and takes off the arm. So the platform, even when it's descending, won't stop because you're in the way. And so if you're close while it's accelerating, going upward, it's not going to stop either. So there's that also element of fear. Now, the light turns red when it shoots up really fast. You get out of the way. Usually you can notice it happens at night when inmates are in their bed. But the speed and wind of the platform going up and the slow descension when it comes down, you know, this allows you to have a moment of being with the platform. But what I thought was interesting was you're able to see your cellies. You know, your cellie is the person in your cell, but these people are also part of your cells. There's this vertical way of looking up and looking down. And in American prisons, at least, you don't get that. You're not able to really see your other cellie. Now, there could be examples where you go to some old-fashioned prisons. They have bars. You know, maybe you can like hold out a mirror and look out the other person. But in maximum security prisons and modern designs, you're not able to really see anybody else. So this series is like the prison is more scary and gruesome in and of itself, but you're allowed to communicate. You're allowed to have that opportunity to build a bond with those above and below you. Okay? Which is a very interesting psychological aspect. I do recall watching some prison documentaries where inmates would pass notes to each other with like a string attachment and fish it. It was very ornate on how they did it. Now, Trimagasi is the old man. Sometimes I'll refer to him by his name, other times just as the old man. He is an interesting fella because the voiceover is really unique. I do believe it's in Spanish, the original, if I remember correctly. I believe it was Spanish. I don't think it was Portuguese. And he's creepy, but he looks helpless, but he's actually quite crazy, as we'll see going on later on. And the whole angle of it is that we must eat, the appreciation of food, okay? And food as a means of breaking the inmate. Now, in American prisons, you get guaranteed food, even though sometimes it's really not that pleasant, right? Obviously, beggars can't be choosers. But by law, you have to have food. And you can get commissary. So your family and others, they can put money on your, what they call money on your books. And you can get junk food and fatten yourself up to be a good little pig in the prison without having to work. Okay? But in the pit, when they first open up, you know, you don't exactly know where this is going when you first open up, and I like that. Suddenly, there's this, you know, level what they're on, and you see that, you know, others have eaten off of this smorgasbord, this buffet, and you don't really know what to make of it, and he doesn't want to eat. But yet you see the old man, he gets on his knees with the pillow. Think about those hard concrete floors, by the way, which also radiate cold and heat. He starts eating, but the other guy's like, no, I don't have an appetite. You know, and then he's told, you don't deserve this level. So you're like, huh, you're already intrigued, like, what's going on here? Now, I also wrote here, can be easy or difficult to eat depending on where you are assigned. So, the higher numbers and lower numbers. So, the closer you are to 0, the better the food will be, the less touched it will be, the more you'll have to pick from. Okay? But, on the lower levels, especially after level 50, 51, food starts to get real scarce. So there's 333 levels. Each inmate is there for a month. Okay? So, this made me kind of think of Ramadan and fasting, how we do for a month. We get 2 meals a day. These ones will get no meals at all for a month. Right? And I thought that was interesting of the starvation aspect, the deprivation, the fasting. They have water, obviously. But how much body fat that person has makes a huge difference as well. Can they fatten themselves up before they go on the next level? But as they overeat, those below them don't get food. And so some people will have to be there for different amounts of time. Some for 6 months. Our main character is going to be there for 6 months and come out with an accredited degree. Whereas the old man has been there for, I believe, over a year. So, you know, yet he's still fat. See what I'm saying? So there's something to that. Now, if you're on the lower levels, things have been picked on and stepped on. Okay? It's really like eating scraps. You sort of imagine yourself if you were in their shoes as a rat, picking up the pickings from under a picnic table. It's really a unique way of looking at humans' relation to food. Okay? And how much food waste occurs. I've discussed this before. But this film, this movie, if you will, this series, has a great way of reminding us about those who really struggle with no food, and how, you know, many of our politicians are obese and old, how our politicians gorge themselves on private jets, got the best health care, but then they advocate for cutting food stamps. I always thought that was quite interesting, how a lot of the MAGA white nationalist Christians will talk about Jesus all day, but then want to cut food programs, right? And you're like, there's something to that, where someone is well fed, so they forget about those below them. And this really comes out in that series, you know, about the difficulty of forcing rations and the difficulty of controlling the appetite, and how the mind is tested when you're deprived. Okay? Now, the old man says, don't pester those who are below you because they are below. So you get this sort of hierarchy angle going on here. And the old man, he pees on those below him. And what's funny about that is this expression we have in America called trickle-down economics. They piss on your head and tell you it's raining. And those at the very, it's not a coincidence that the image on our money is a pyramid. The well-fed, those at the top, and those at the bottom got to share less and less and less resources. There's really something to that, A lot of occult symbolism on our money. They're slowly changing it to kind of erase what's in our faces because of the internet, and more people are becoming aware of how much our government hates us. And in this series, there's something called the administration. And so how our government administration doesn't like us, kind of like how the administration that governs this prison is really up to something under their sleeves. Now, you would think, why do these people, or the old man in particular, they get gassed that puts them to sleep, and then they wake up at different levels. So you don't really get to choose where you go. So how can you look down upon those below when you've been below? But also, don't pester those below also because they don't have food and they're suffering, right? When you're well fed and well tended to, you have energy. I think a lot of Muslims can attest to when you're having a rough day of fasting, you're tired, you want to nap, you don't want to talk too much, your ears may hurt, sounds, you're more irritable in terms of stimulation, both visual and audio. And so, you're more temperamental. So you can interpret the old man's don't pester those below in multiple ways. Right? Now, it's important to analyze the agony of the lower levels, because as food becomes more and more scarce, people lash out. And I thought this was a great way of just showing how in some countries where there isn't that much food, there's so much strife and rioting and looting, you can't really get people to organize, and you begin to realize that could do a lot with the lack of food. And at the same time, when you look in America, how the fat cats, it's really funny when you see like old imagery of like a fat cat or a fat pig in a suit gorging itself, and then you see how many American politicians themselves are fat, or just how people who work in different positions in management are often fat. And then you just begin to see some of these old stereotypes coming true, and how those on the other lower levels are treated with contempt, and how you have agony. The social hierarchy, class hierarchy, workplace hierarchy. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with having different privileges in different class systems. Each one will have a particular struggle, right? But this prison example brings out a unique one because it's not permanent. You're only there for 30 days. And you could be on the bottom level next. And you could be, put above next time. So how can you really look down upon your fellow inmate when you yourself could be below their level or above their level? You see? So it really shows you how quickly some people will feel superior or inferior depending on where they're positioned for 30 days. Very unique part of the film. So the fasting element is quite unique, and I really enjoyed that. Now, the ones above, the old man says, the ones are above, right? You don't want to bother them. And they won't answer you because they are above. So when you're shouting to, hey, let's work together, or this or that, or hey, do this or that. The people on the bottom, they're like, F you, you're on the next level, what do you know? And then the ones on the upper level are like, we don't have to listen to you, you're on the lower level. So, you know, it's like when a dishwasher tries to talk to the owner, and the owner just thinks like, you're scum, you wash dishes, I own this place, who the hell are you? And so you can see this example in our own life. And I liked how the show really brought that out. You know, you'll have a head chef. I've had terrible experiences with chefs. And it's fascinating how many of them were fat. When this movie, the series, really made me think of that. And I remember there was one chef named Josh. And man, he was just a porker. And he was always eating. But if you wanted to have some French fries to share with the servers or busing staff, you know, he'd be pissy about it. But when his friend would come in, he gives them a free beer, free appetizers, free desserts. Like, he fattens them up. But to the own workers who keep everything afloat, you know, he didn't care. You had to be his favor in order to get anything. And so I really found that to be quite unique, and he wouldn't want to be told anything. You know, he just thought he was perfect. They get this superiority complex. So you have the inferiority complex and the superiority complex, both of which are bad. And that comes out really well in this series. Because even though they're on different levels, they are literally all equal because they're inmates. Even if what they're in for is for different crimes, they still are going to suffer no matter what, depending on the level they're on, and they don't get to choose. And they also don't get to choose their cellies, except for the one lady with her dumb dog. A dog she named Ramses II. Okay, now, level 48 is where they wake up. Okay, where he goes into. And that's not that bad. There's still food, but it's been picked at. Now, I remember eating at this sushi place, and it was one of my favorite places. But then I found out from the dishwasher, who also worked at the cafe that I worked at, that the boss would take food from the plates and then reserve it to people. Okay? And that servers would eat off the plates. I have done that when I was struggling. If some customers had like mussels, you know, I don't know if you know what a mussel is, like clams, oysters, they scoop it out with a little ladle, you know, and they eat. And if I was to clean their plate, I know they didn't touch it, but I would eat off of it. And this happened quite a lot. There's a bruschetta. You know, and you can also see the table if they're not coughing, if they're mostly chit-chatting away from their food. It's less likely they've spitting on their food. And you'd be surprised how many people order things and don't really eat it. And I was struggling financially. And that's one reason why I liked working in restaurants, was because I knew that if I couldn't afford food, I could eat off the plates of people at work. And, you know, that's why I'm so into food today. Well, I've always have been into food. But I'm very conscientious of that. And so I've eaten off of people's plates. Now, if they've bitten off of it, obviously not. But I've never been at that level where I needed to do that. Right? Because there still are germs in people's mouths that can make you sick. And so, when they wake up on level 48, this platform that's there, that doesn't stay too long, you know, there's an apple that hasn't been bitten. But there's been, you know, when someone eats a chicken wing, there's still meat on it. There's a bit of that going on. Someone's taking a chunk out of the cake. And some of these people are really dirty. You have to remember, they don't get to shower. They have a sink, right? But they're very stinky. And each person's hygiene isn't going to be the same. Okay? So, their sweat, their stink, then they may not wash their hands because of depression of being in the prison, all that. And then they touch food, and they eat off of it. Well, you know, you can imagine the dirtiness and the filthiness. And so it's a risk to have to eat off of their spitting food, but you're so hungry. And our main character, he's at a level where there's still some food left. And the old man lets him know, you don't deserve this level. It can be really scary at the lower levels because that's when the cannibalism starts. And they could have done the cannibalism scenes better, but what I don't understand is scientifically, if you can't eat pork raw and chicken raw without getting violently ill, how can you eat a human? And all the diseases humans have, wouldn't you get sick? You know, that's something that I didn't understand because there's no way to cook it. And raw meat, if you ever had raw meat, red meat, it's quite chewy. You know, it's quite chewy. So, you know, that's really strange. I don't really get the part. I don't want to interview a doctor and just be like, how is this possible without getting a terrible disease? But lots of horror shows, zombies, you know, cannibalism, eating humans, pretty much used to it, and it's historically been quite accurate. When planes have crashed, survivors eat one another. Unfortunately, you know, humans are meat. We crave meat. You know, it's easy to be a vegan or vegetarian when the market supplies you with consistent soy and kale, spinach and nuts. Okay? But when you actually don't have food, it's like the fear response comes in and now you're in survival mode. Okay? And so the lower levels, they struggle with food and it plays with their mind. I mean, even when you fast during Ramadan, there are people who, they think about what they're going to eat, and when they eat, the food tastes different. I remember when my first Ramadan, it was fascinating how better the food tasted. You know? Because you're hungry, you got a mad appetite, you eat it and you're like, it has even more flavor. Right? Versus if you're already semi-full and you eat something, it's like your taste buds are telling you, stop here, we don't need it. That's why when I see very, very morbidly obese people, I wonder, you know, how do they keep eating? How does their tongue not be like, I'm not hungry no more? Right? So, just philosophically examining how we deal with food, how our taste buds responds, how we can feel satiated, how we can still maintain gratitude, how we can have a nice refined palate, you know, all that stuff comes to play here. And so for the 1 month duration, they're on level 48, so he's getting quite comfy with what's going on here. Now, the pillow for the knees is interesting too because it shows you just how weak we are. And just today, I saw an ad on Instagram that showed a prayer mat with a pillow installed where the knees go. Now, I remember when I was, you know, getting 8 months pregnant with my last baby, that it was hard on my knees, but that was because my knees already had problems. It was like my left knee, and then it switched to my right, and that was kind of hard. But if you think about being on carpet, it ain't that hard. Now, if you're on the hardwood floor, maybe you have an argument. But the stone, the perfectly straight, level stone. Now we're talking pain in the knees, right? Especially for old people with arthritis and gout, all the other ailments that strike the elderly in their joints. But also, when Baharat, one of the black guy character, as they're descending, there's a lady holding her pillow. So some people really use their pillow as a sort of comforting device. And I'm sure you know women who sleep with a lot of pillows. I have a lot of pillows. Yes, I'm one of those ladies. But there's some women who just have a lot of pillows for display. Others you put between the knees, you hug one, you have the pillow here. It's about positioning. And if you have carpal tunnel, sometimes pillows can really help, which I sometimes struggle with carpal tunnel. And if you are pregnant, you should have a pillow under your feet to let the blood go down so you don't get varicose veins. Or at least reduce the likelihood of getting as many as you might get. So the pillow angle becomes useful, and you start to notice it, and it becomes almost ritualistic. Like you're getting on your knees, very humble, using a pillow, and you contrast this to the way Americans eat. Like I'll see videos of people in the Middle East, they're sitting and eating, or the food on the floor. I can't do that. It's very uncomfortable. My feet will start to go numb, like the blood circulation gets cut off, and then I just feel physically uncomfortable. I like sitting on a stool or on a chair when I eat. It's very difficult to sit on the floor and eat. I just don't think everyone can sit that way. But eating on your knees and you're eating leftovers, it's very humble. It's very breaking. I think about how us Muslims, we prostrate, we bend, like how we do our prayers, how we do our salah. It's mighty different than the Christians. They get on their knees in the pews, like, and there's a little, I remember when I went to mass once, it was, they have these things that pull out from the bottom. It's like a thin bar, but it's cushiony. So that when you're sitting in the pew, then when it's time to get on your knees, you go on the bottom of the bench, there's a thing you pull out for your knees to then do your little prayer, right? And so, protecting the knees is very humbling, but getting on your knees is a sign of humbleness. This is why you hear phrases like bend the knee, get on your knees. It's an act of letting that person know you're below them. It's an act of submission. It's an act of cutting down arrogance and haughtiness, right? And so these people on the outside might have been high and mighty, full of arrogance. Now they're on their knees, picking at a table, a platform, if you will, a spread of things that have been picked over depending on what level they're on. Now, one thing I didn't get was why people on the other levels would jump off. I didn't understand that. But also, I think it has to do with the isolation. I had a person in my life who eliminated themselves while they were locked up. And so I think even if you have food, the psychological aspect of being contained within those four walls can, really mess with some people's brains. And so, even though you're on your knees and you're grateful for the food that's in front of you, the mind goes and races, right? And it's picked out as leftover, and your appetite will change, okay, as you go on. And I really liked that, because I think it's like a cleansing, really. It's really a way of appreciating and resetting, okay? And I find that to be quite unique. Like, we must always have gratitude for food. When I come across these women who call themselves, I'm a goddess, I'm main character energy, they're gold diggers, I know that they're trying to survive, but the way in which they shame women who marry average men, I just find these women to have a lot of wickedness and vanity in them. Because they haven't apparently been imprinted with the fact that they could be on their knees as well, struggling and trying to, eat bugs in order to survive. Because that can happen to any one of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can strike us down and really bring us to our knees. I like to think of Prophet Job. May Allah be pleased with him. Because he had to really struggle, didn't he? And then later he got everything back better than, but he still had to go through it, of deprivation of food, illness. And I really find that to be a wisdom that is uncomfortable to go through, but is very helpful. Because if you look at, for example, people starving in Palestine, reaching out for food, fighting over bread, and then I recall I was working at this one breakfast cafe. They'd have fresh baked pastries. The boss refused to donate the food, refused to let us take some home, and we had to dump it in the trash. It was like, it made me hate her in a deep way. Just, why would you do that? If there is food left over, like there would be hash browns, and we're about to close, they would the line cook. Sometimes there's a chef, sometimes there's not. But the line cook would have like the squares, right? And these were fresh potatoes that they would shave and then put on the flat top. And the trash can was right there. Oh, we're closed. Into the trash. Not, hey, does anyone want to take this home? You know, it was just absurd how much food waste I saw there. And if you wanted mayonnaise or avocado or extra relish, she would charge you 50 cents here, 75 cents there. So she'd nickel and dime her own employees while throwing away massive amounts of food. She sold the business and it went on to someone else. But that really stuck in my head. Because when you work in the restaurant industry, you see vast amounts of food waste. And you're just like, why? Now, there are some cool jobs where a customer, let's say, they're like, oh, I ordered the wrong thing. And before they've touched it, they send it back. This happens, and it's an honest mistake. And I like it when the bosses say, does anyone want to eat this? If someone says no, then they chuck it. But if someone says yes, they let us eat it. I really like that. Because why waste food? And I think America is a country of very well-fed hogs that have forgotten what hunger feels like. And that's why Republican Christians are so quick to cut off food stamps. Yet, a lot of Mennonites and Baptists will do food pantries. I remember in Philadelphia, there was a Baptist church that had a pop-up food thing, food that was about to expire, but we could get there and eat. And I really need that. My baby brother was in a stroller. Mom's on welfare. We're living in Philly in the hood. We need some bread, some celery, and we gotta make it work. So I really am thankful for people. And honesty comes. So some of them have just a cabinet, cans of soup, says take what you need. A selfish person will take everything in the cabinet and hoard it. Whereas an honest person will just take, okay, we can have this, and can have that. Save it for others. This show shows that as well. If everyone ate what they needed to sustain their body calorie count, there'd be food for the lower levels. But people gorge themselves. And I found that to be something that shows in the real world. So when horror can bring the real world, but also to a unique scenario that we haven't seen before, and get you thinking and send a political message, a moral message, while eliciting a sort of cathartic fear, now we're talking. Now we're getting somewhere. Because most shows now just show nudity, drugs, and, you know, it's not really any talent anymore. I made a live stream where it says, like, why does Hollywood have such lazy writers? And I think House of the Dragon was a good example of lazy writing. HBO just has to put in lots of boobs, lots of, you know, humping, and then they think that's entertainment. That just shows you how low they think of their viewers, right? Okay? But this one shows a different style of getting under our fingernails and sort of making us look into the black mirror of our own lives. Okay? Now, there was a cool scene, I thought it was really interesting, where the old man, he starts picking up a bottle of red wine. He's just like, yes, this month there's lots of Muslims and non-drinkers, so we're going to have wine. And this made me think of that experiment where they put cocaine in the water of a rat cage. And, you know, rats get pretty bored. I had 2 pet rats. One was named El Gordo Zorro, and the other one was Bilbo Baggins. Okay? Zorro is Antonio Banderas. He plays this character, and he's really handsome and in shape. but in Spanish I named my rat El Gordo, so like the fat guy, the fat one. Sort of. So it was really funny. But anyways, the rat would just keep drinking up that cocaine water until it died because it's so bored. But when you provide a rat with entertainment and other things, they're not gonna go to the cocaine water as much. I'm summarizing and really condensing down what it is that the basically what the experiment was. But when I saw this old man desperately clinging to the wine, I thought of that. And also, inmates make pruno. I don't know if they still call it that, but they're able to keep fruit from their meat trays and make old-fashioned wine and get drunk. And drugs still get in to the prisons, okay? And I find that to be fascinating because they're bored, they want to get high and take their mind to loony land. But if they just didn't do that, I think that they could really purify themselves. But I just think it's fascinating how Muslims in the pit were so strong they didn't drink alcohol while they were there. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. To refrain. So it showed, it was a, I don't know if the directors intended that, but it was just kind of a little compliment to Muslims that even though there might be a Muslim in that pit, they're not going to submit and drink alcohol. And then so, another unique aspect was if you keep food, the cell will either get super hot to where you're roasted alive or super cold to where you freeze to death. That I thought was interesting. Because you might be thinking when you first watch the series, oh, I know, just start hoarding food in the cell, you won't starve. No. So that proves that there must be cameras and there's people watching what happens in these monstrous cells. It reminds me of Squid Game and how there were the soldiers and, you know, different people watching the cameras at every angle all the time, right? Surveillance. Now, obviously, and then we see this when he keeps, you know, he keeps an item. I think it was an apple, maybe, yellowish apple, if I recall. But also, there's a time where the dog is eating something. That lady brings her stupid dog into the pit, foolish, and it's still eating, and he has to take the food out of the dog's mouth and chuck it down to the back onto the descending platform. And so that was a unique angle of cutting us off from saying, oh, like from dismissing the tension and severity of the platform and the prison design itself. So I like that, because you think to yourself, oh yeah, we'll just get around it by creating a little mini market all up in the cell, you know? Then what's the big deal? Then it won't be so bad. Or that you'll just be able to stuff food in your pockets and take it with you to the lower cells, you know? But no. And if you think about it further, if they were allowed to hoard food, you could easily pass food up or down. You know, some items at least. And this would prevent people from starving, and then the prison wouldn't be as bad. But no. There's a surveillance detection system that picks up your every movement, and you're not going to cut corners or find a loophole. And I thought that was great. Very creative. Now, the food is only theirs while the platform is on their level. And you don't get too much time. And when you just think about how you're in school, you gotta eat, you gotta finish before the bell rings, there's a timer, right? And when you're on your lunch break, if you spend too much time looking at your phone or talking and you don't finish your food, now you wasted it, and there goes the opportunity, you gotta go back to work. So, time frames of food consumption already exist. So I found this one to be unique. But it also doesn't give you time to actually savor. So I thought about how when you're a stay-at-home mom, you have these slow mornings where you are able to appreciate enjoying, like, for example, my husband, when we can afford it, he'll bring me a cheese Danish and a nice vanilla latte. And he'll watch the youngest so that I can just sit, read the news, and get some updates, reply to emails or whatever, and enjoy my pastry and coffee in the morning. But on other days where he has to go to work really early, I have to, like if your coffee's staying hot, you're trying to take care of that little one, they're creating a tornado, you don't get that. Your coffee's cold, might as well have a nice latte at that point. But timing and being able to really savor what it is you are consuming is a privilege. It's actually a blessing. And if we're so accustomed to that, we may forget that. And I think this film did a great job of highlighting that, reminding us, see, which of your favors of your Lord will you deny? Comes up in the Quran. And I found that to be very potent for those of us who like to do reflection and introspection and examination, self-analysis, all that stuff, to really look at everything we have that's wonderful, to prevent us from becoming haughty, arrogant, pompous brats, right? And so, while the food is there for a little while, pardon me, we get to see how people react. And as it goes lower, the platform, people become more uncouth, stepping on the food, not thinking about, okay, table manners. Okay, let me grab this, grab that. I eat it, it goes down. Some people are just grabbing and grabbing and grabbing and stepping, and they're contaminating the food, which can make people even more ill and suffer more. And there's no medical service there. So you get the flu, you get some type of ailment, your celly slashed you, no one's coming to help you. There's no doctor who's going to come into the cell and take out that violent celly. They're only going to watch, similar to Squid Game. Now, in American prisons, obviously, there's going to be some instances where you will be punished for killing your celly. That's going to add to your years, and you'll lose celly privileges, and you'll be in isolation. So that doesn't happen really in American prisons, although there's R-wording that happens, and then the victim doesn't come forward because they feel shame or they've been threatened into silence. So there is some unaccounted for violence and transgressions in American prisons. But in this series, and in Squid Game, the inmates are allowed to do whatever they want to each other. In a raw human experiment example. Okay? Now, oh yeah, you cannot leave early. So, even if you go in there voluntarily, like Goreng, our main character, you're not just allowed to leave. Like, oh, I give up, I quit. No. You signed away that ability. Nope, you don't get out. Okay. Now, our main character is there for 6 months, and he brought the book Don Quixote. I used to have that book. I read it in one of my English classes, did a report on it. I didn't really find it that funny. I think I put it in the recycle bin because when I wanted to grab it to make this video, I couldn't find it. Not every book I keep. But bringing Don Quixote about this guy, this knight who, he thinks he's a knight in shining armor and very chivalrous. He's delusional. It's just funny that story is brought up here. But he brought a book while others brought swords and other items. Okay, but remember, they don't exactly know what they're walking into, which made me think I would probably bring a book too. The Quran, the Hadith, something like that, right? I'm guilty of that as well. Because if you don't know, because remember, in American prisons, inmates do read a law. So it's natural to think to bring a book. Whereas the others thought, weapons. right? You think about time and entertainment. How can you make the passing of time manageable, right? So he wanted to go in there for 6 months to get an accredited degree. I thought that was wild. Why would you give a degree to somebody who didn't actually study? Just kind of shows you a little bit of the corruption, right? Why would he put himself through that for a degree? What will students do to themselves in order to achieve their goals? Now, as I mentioned, the platform shoots up fast. So you're not going to jump on it as it accelerates. So good luck with that. Because I first thought about that as well. But you can descend. Once you descend, though, you're stuck there. Okay. And when you look at how he was on a level, and how when people first get there and they wake up on a decent level, they don't exactly appreciate what level they're on. And so that's also made me think about how us today, while we have economic prosperity, we must always appreciate that. And I am so thankful for the access to markets, to buy diverse items for different prices, to have access to food, because there is real food deserts. In some communities, the store owners, they get robbed, they get looted, the customers' cars get broken into, so it's not profitable to have a business there, and the people there ruin it for everyone else. Okay? They make it hard for honest businesses to not only have their employees safe, but their customers safe at the same time. In-N-Out in Oakland left, it's just too much crime there. Cars are being broken into, and I would love to go to some of the burrito joints in some of the more dangerous parts of of California, because they're darn good food. But is a burrito, some tacos with some fire salsa, is it worth my having to pay to get a new window installed because some crackhead broke into it? Probably not, right? So when you look at places that are allowed to have businesses in a safe, high trust community, they're able to flourish and have beauty. Low trust communities, there isn't going to be too many food options because of the danger. And so when we look at people deserving their level, I also think about our social levels. How we are able to safely go to the market and not be mugged for our food on the way home. How there will be different selections of beans, plantains. There will be, bison, elk, different food items, kosher and halal. And you're just like, this is amazing. This is great. Should always be humble. And I have greatly grown to appreciate that. Just thinking about the different amounts of jams and jellies that are quality made. And the different rices, bamboo rice, black rice, wild rice, red rice, brown rice, basmati, arrobio, short grain, long grain. You begin to see this is something that people 1,000 years ago would have dreamed of. And I always try to appreciate that. I buy a lot of goat's milk, and just the fact that I'm allowed, I only was able to have goat milk by coming here to California. Because California has so many different people with different tastes, we're able to have different items available. And it's from a humane certified dairy farm. And so you're like, cool. Get a little bit of cow milk, and you can also find raw milk, and then you can also get goat milk. And I find that to be pretty awesome, right? And so while you're able to have access, that level of access to food, you must always appreciate it. Because there is someone in the world who probably deserves it more than you, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tested them. And so I greatly appreciate that. Just being able to walk into a store and have sparkling waters from this spring, that spring, imported glacier water, you name it, you're like, this is pretty cool. When in the past, people had to really go to wells and it was filled with parasites and different bacteria, and they would get inflated guts, and just the struggle of having clean water. We have clean water. Not everywhere, obviously, if you look at the map of California. But, pardon me, we still have a consistent flow of potable water. And I find that to be a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, that angle of the prison does mirror onto our world. And I made a video talking about how a good wife appreciates access to pure water. Tons of women will laugh at that. I bet you they'll be like, oh, really? My guy has to buy me a Bugatti, he has to buy me this purse and these high heels, or he ain't a real man. And I just think about, I kind of wish I could take that girl, put her in a helicopter, and drop her in the middle of Palestine and say, have at it, ho. Go on. And then how she just falls apart within 30 days. And is like drinking water off the floor. Think about how in Game of Thrones, Cersei Lannister starts drinking water off the floor after she smacks it out of that nun lady's hand. She presents the ladle of water, Cersei smacks it after she says, confess, confess. And Cersei takes her pride, smacks it, and then, she's sipping off the dirty floor. Now, who was Cersei? She was, in the Red Keep, drinking finest Dornish red wines, right? Could just get anything she wanted at any time. Now she's in a cell, covered in muck and grime, sipping off the floor. There's something to that, where if you get too used to being at the top of the pyramid, on the level, higher levels, like in the pit, you can easily forget about the levels below you and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can place you. And so, deserving is such a great angle here. And I'm very happy about all the different things I thought about concerning this series. I have many more notes. Inshallah, I'll be able to record some more angles. I need to go get some chicken in the oven, alhamdulillah. But I just found it to be a great reminder about appreciating access to food. Okay? And then it also pisses me off that there are some charities who will buy bulk items and create too much of a profit margin, and they don't disperse the food, they hoard the money, they siphon off money. And I think about how food trucks can't get into Palestine, how it's being, taken aback. Think about self-reliance, food security, homesteaders, how we're polluting the oceans, and that's like a bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us, that no matter how poor you are, you go get yourself a fishing pole, you eat some fish, but we're polluting our own food supply. Breaks my heart. How vegans and vegetarians and wimpy people say you shouldn't be able to hunt, but at the same time you're like, if we preserve the forests, maintain the wildlife, this is an emergency food supply for people who may not be able to afford to, go and buy some meat. You can go hunt it. So if you just think about how many animals we can eat on this planet, and you're like, subhanallah, this is awesome, and think about zoning laws. Oh, you can't have a chicken coop here, you can't have this, you can't have that. And you think about how chickens are a great food source, so are ducks and quail and geese rather. This is amazing, right? But the cities limit you for whatever their reasoning is. But it's wonderful to think about being able to have access to food, appreciating it, and how much we should respect those who maintain the food supply. It's just a wonderful mind exercise. And so I hope you enjoyed thus far our discussion of a platform on Netflix. And let me know if you watched it and some things you thought about. And then I'll continue this in further series, inshallah. Take care.